We'll now begin our trek through the bug-like insect groups. Virtually every family has quite unique habits and life cycles, though they all work off the template of having an incomplete life cycle. In this module, we'll cover the cicadas that are revered and honored worldwide. If you go to France, you can't miss all the cicada motifs that abound in shops and buildings. Chinese, Greeks, Mayans, and Aztecs use cicadas in their religious ceremonies. We'll also discuss the treehoppers that often have elaborate modifications of their pronotum that make them look like thorns. And finally, we'll discuss the spittlebugs. The adults of these are called froghoppers because they are generally oval in outline and can jump. We'll find out that the nymphal spit isn't really spit at all. Cicadas are generally large to medium-sized insects. They have large bulging eyes and the wings are membranous throughout, though the wings can have color markings. The antennae are spike-like and the males have distinctive flaps on the anterior segments of the abdominal sternites. These flaps cover the tymbals that are the sound-producing organs. Males produce a wide array of buzzes and clicks as mating and aggregation calls. The adults and nymphs have their sucking mouthparts arising from the back of the head. Periodical cicadas are unique to North America. These species take 17 or 13 years to complete their life cycles, depending on the species and location. Basically, the more northern species take 17 years to complete their life cycles, and southern species take 13 years. Cicadas are commonly called locusts in the United States. Apparently, our English colonial forefathers experienced some mass emergences of the cicadas, and they thought they were experiencing a biblical plague of locusts. I find it humorous that some French colonists wrote at that time that the stupid English don't know the difference between a cicada and a grasshopper. All the periodical cicadas have black bodies with red eyes and orange wing veins and legs. There are currently 7 species recognized, and 2 or more species commonly emerge in any one location most years in eastern North America. These emergences are called broods. Cicada nymphs don't look much like the adults because the nymphs are highly modified for their soil-dwelling existence. They have stout front legs which are used for digging. All cicada nymphs feed on plant roots. Periodical cicadas and most of the larger species feed on tree roots. Apparently, they are xylem feeders. When periodical cicadas emerge, they do so in huge numbers. Emergence usually occurs in mid-May, and most of the adults will be out of the ground within a week to 10 days of the start of emergence. The males of each species has a unique call, but this is often difficult to determine when hundreds are calling at the same time. Males tend to call at the same time, and their sounds can appear to rise and fall at the same time. This is called chorusing. Chorusing males attract other males to an area as well as females seeking mating. It is believed that mass emergences help this insect survive predation. They are favored food for birds and other animals, including cats and dogs. Pets often engorge so much that they may regurgitate the ground-up cicadas onto the carpet, much to the annoyance of the pet owners. It appears that the abundant food also overwhelms natural predators, and the chorusing seems to chase away some birds. After mating, the female cicadas use their sword-shaped ovipositors to cut slits in the bark of small-diameter branches. Each slit is provided with a dozen or more eggs. Many people are simply freaked out by the abundance of insects present when a periodical cicada emergence occurs. The insects are harmless, and I generally encourage people to actually visit areas where big emergences are occurring just to experience the sounds and number of insects present. Cicadas are not without harm to ornamental plants. Eggs inserted into small stems often cause the stems to die and flag. This branch death may not happen until a year later, and those branches that do survive often have scars that can be observed for years after the emergence event. For mature trees, most entomologists and forest health folks chalk up the flagging as nature's periodic pruning. However, in some small landscape trees and in fruit orchards, periodical cicada egg laying can be a major problem. In such cases, only fine netting placed over the trees can keep the cicadas out. Sprays will knock down adult cicadas that are present, but new adults can fly into the trees a few days later. Since periodical cicadas spend so much time in the ground, the nymphal feeding is not noticed, though there have been some studies that indicate that during the last couple of years of nymphal development, the large nymphs can slow tree growth and inhibit seed production. Usually a year before emergence and in the spring of an emergence, the large nymphs begin to form emergence tubes to the soil surface. This can show up as small mounds of soil. When the nymphs are really ready to emerge, they break through the top of their tubes. Mud tubes are more apparent during years when the soils are saturated at the time of emergence. Mass emergence usually occurs at dusk, though the nymphs can emerge any time during the day. The nymphs climb any nearby surface, which is usually a tree trunk. Once they find a secure place to hook their legs, they split the exoskeleton down the back, and the unpigmented adult will emerge and expand its wings. This process often takes about an hour, and another couple of hours are needed to harden the exoskeleton and acquire the adult pigmentation. Here is a U.S. Forest Service map that shows the locations of the different broods. The broods are numbered sequentially. Notice that some broods have overlapping territory, but most are pretty well defined geographically. In most years, there will be a brood that emerges somewhere. Because of the 17 and 13-year brood differences, there are some rare times when these broods may emerge in the same year. There are 3 species of 17-year cicadas, and most broods will have all 3 species emerging, but some broods have apparently lost one of the species, or one species may be rare. Being aware of these brood maps is good for the landscape manager who can prepare customers for emergences. Generally, people who have their homes in or near old woodlots are the ones who will experience most of the activity. Periodical cicada emergence in dense urban areas is rare, and neighborhoods that were established on old agricultural lands usually don't have the activity. It's easy to calculate the next emergence time by adding 17 or 13 years to the last emergence year. Currently, there are about 170 species of cicadas found in North America north of Mexico. Most of the species are relatively large, and their nymphs appear to feed on tree and shrub roots. There are species that emerge everywhere every year, but only in small numbers when compared to the periodical cicadas. Some produce really loud calls and are quite noticeable when they begin to sing in a tree or shrub. The large species that come out each year are generally called annual or dog day cicadas or harvest flies, though many of the species take 2 to 3 years to complete their nymphal development. Most of these are mainly green or brown in color. Most of the ones that are green and brown are in the genus Neotibicen, and the larger, predominantly brown and black species are in the genus Megatibicen. The Megatibicen are generally found in western and southern states. Some southern species sing at dusk and into the night. Some of these can be really loud. The little grass cicadas are often only an inch long and are most common in grassland habitats. The annual and dog day cicada species usually emerge a month or more after the periodical cicada emergence, being most common in July and August. The two-marked treehoppers are very common in landscapes where they prefer to feed on redbud, black walnut, shagbark hickory, and willows. The adults look a little like black thorns, and they have 2 white patches on the dorsal keel of the pronotum. The pronotum is expanded forward to cover the back of the head, and the posterior of the pronotum projects well over the abdomen. In many tropical species, the top of the pronotum can have extreme spikes, knobs, and horns. The forewings are often leathery and colored, but some species have the forewings entirely membranous. They have hind legs modified for jumping, and adults will readily jump, but the nymphs won't jump unless they're provoked. Most also produce honeydew, but this is generally dropped away from their location, or ants will solicit them for the honeydew. Females lay eggs by cutting slits in the bark of small branches into which batches of eggs are inserted, side by side. The Twomarked Treehopper has a habit of covering the egg patches with a white gummy material. This can often look like soft scales to some people. Eggs hatch in the spring, and the nymphs take 4 to 6 weeks to finish their development. The adults can live for most of the rest of the summer, and females continue to lay eggs until the first killing frost. The eggs remain dormant until the next spring. The buffalo treehopper is a North American native, but it has been introduced into Europe where it can be an important pest. It is green with the pronotum extending laterally to form 2 short horns. The adults are about 3/8 of an inch long, and the nymphs are ornamented with paired spines that arise from each thoracic and abdominal segment. This insect can feed on a wide range of trees, shrubs, and even some perennial flowers. The females insert batches of eggs into slits of hardwood tree branches that are only 2 to 3 years old. The ovipositioned slits can develop callus tissues, which makes the branches rough and scab-like. This one also overwinters as eggs, and in May to June the nymphs emerge to begin sucking phloem juices. The nymphs will move about and often drop from the trees to feed on other plants below. The adults appear in July and can be active for most of the rest of the summer. It has been found that most treehoppers produce drumming sounds on host plants. These drumming sounds are to attract mates, and there is some evidence that drumming may also communicate that a good feeding site has been found. In the landscape, controls are rarely warranted. The oak treehopper appears to be a species complex, or possibly a species with many biotypes. It can be found on deciduous and live oaks from Brazil to Canada. It is a gregarious species with nymphs and adults often clustering in large groups on oak branches. The adults have a white body, and there may be red, orange, or yellow markings or stripes. The pronotum can be broadly rounded or have a prominent horn that projects forward. The nymphs are brightly colored with black, yellow, and orange. The nymphs also have a pair of sharp spines that project upward from the pronotum. This species will overwinter as eggs inserted under the bark of small oak tree branches. The eggs of North American types hatch in the spring, and the nymphs undergo 5 instars that can take 4 to 6 weeks to develop. The adults can remain active for most of the rest of the summer, feeding and laying eggs. Again, this species rarely causes sufficient damage to warrant control. The thorn treehopper is also known simply as the thorn bug. This resident of South and Central America into Mexico also occurs in Florida. Its favorite hosts are acacia and bottlebrush species. Adults can be found during most of the year. In warm months, females will cut elongate slits down small stems and insert 20 to 50 eggs. She will stand guard over the eggs that take about 3 weeks to hatch. After hatching, the female also remains near the nymphs and will apparently react as a decoy if potential predators threaten the nymphs. The nymphs are brightly colored and have 3 spikes projecting upward. They apparently sequester defensive chemicals from their food that permeates their bodies. The nymphs take about a month to finish their development. Males can have a variety of horn shapes that arise from the top of the pronotum, while females have a short, stout, thorn-shaped spike. This species can have 3 to 5 generations per season, with females only rearing 1 clutch of young. This species also communicates with drumming sounds. There are over 250 species of membracids in North America north of Mexico. While they are called treehoppers, they commonly feed and develop on perennial and annual plants. Most of these are rather small and are often found on leaf undersurfaces or at the bases of leaf petioles where they can resemble unopened leaf buds. The upper image is of a common species that is very commonly found developing on the undersides of perennial leaves. The genus Entilia is characterized by the adults having a distinctive notch in the pronotal shield. Publilia species are usually small and brown in color. Most of the species feed on perennials such as asters. Nymphs of both genera are often tended by ants, and they also produce sounds for finding mates and locations for feeding. The spittlebugs are very interesting insects, though their name is incorrect. When nymphs hatch, they begin to extract plant sap, but instead of ejecting the honeydew, they allow the sugary droplet to cover their bodies. They then stick the tip of their abdomen out of the droplet and take air into folds of their abdominal pleura. They then pull the abdomen back in and expel the air to make a bubble. They repeat this process until they have a frothy mass covering their bodies. Hence, I say they should be called anal bubble bugs. The Meadow Spittlebug is a common species that feeds on a wide range of annual and perennial plants, including legumes like alfalfa. This species overwinters as eggs tucked into stem crevices of potential host plants. In early spring, the nymphs hatch, form their spittle masses, and develop for 3 to 4 weeks, undergoing 5 instars. When ready to molt for the last time, the nymph emerges from the spittle mass to hang upside down in order to emerge and expand the wings. The adults live a long time during the summer, feeding and laying eggs. There's only one generation per season. Heavy infestations can stunt growth, and the spittle masses can develop sooty mold and provide habitat for plant disease invasion. The pine spittlebug can attack most pine species, and it has rarely been found on other conifers that are growing near pines. This species overwinters as eggs inserted into the bark tissues of small pine branches. When serviceberry and flowering dogwoods bloom, the eggs hatch, and the nymphs usually move to the bases of expanding shoots. Here they begin to feed and form their spittle masses. As the nymphs grow, several nymphs can occupy a single large spittle mass. When the last instar nymph is ready to molt into the adult, it leaves the spittle mass and crawls to the tip of a nearby needle to hang down, molt, and expand its wings. The adults can live for 1 to 2 months, during which time the females insert up to 30 eggs individually in thin bark with their sharp ovipositors. The spittle mass moisture and feeding punctures are implicated in enhancing infection by the pine tip blight fungus Diplodia. Recently, Hemiptera taxonomus has split up the former spittlebug family into 3 families. One major group is the spittlebugs that have short, truncated bodies. These are most common on perennial herbaceous plants, but several species attack woody shrubs. The Dogwood Spittlebug is one such species. This species attacks gray dogwood cultivars, and it is not normally found on flowering dogwood. Like most of the spittlebugs discussed, the eggs overwinter in bark slits created by the female. In late spring, usually early June, the nymphs hatch and form their spittle masses on outer branches. Several nymphs can settle on the same branch, and most remain in their individual spittle masses. Development usually takes about a month, and adults are present in July. Adults live for 4 to 6 weeks, mating and inserting eggs into the bark tissues. The red cedar spittlebug is another one of the small truncated spittlebug species. This one is often found in landscape junipers and arborvitae. Eggs are inserted into the thin bark of small branches, and these overwinter. In May, the eggs hatch, and the nymphs usually form their spittle masses on small twig bases. The adults begin to appear 4 to 6 weeks later. These can live for a month or 2, during which time they feed, mate, and insert eggs before dying. The Twolined Spittlebug is a unique pest because its nymphs and adults feed on grasses, including lawn grasses. but the adults often will feed on woody shrubs. The adults can cause flagging of small branches of hollies in southern states. This species is most common where warm season grasses are grown, with St. Augustine and centipede grass being most heavily attacked. However, Bermuda grass is often attacked but seldom damaged. This pest overwinters as eggs inserted into grass stem tissues. In the spring, the nymphs hatch and begin feeding by sucking sap from grass stems deep in the turf canopy. The nymphs take a month or more to develop, and the conspicuous, nearly black adults with two red-orange bands across their backs often leave the turf to feed on nearby shrubs. Hollies are favored adult food plants. There are usually 2 generations during the summer. Apparently, holly plants can react poorly after being punctured by the adults, and small branches can flag. Heavy nymphal feeding can kill patches of turf grass, especially the slow-growing centipede grass. And people just don't like walking or playing on lawns that have spittle masses in them. There are over 250 species of spittlebugs known to occur in North America north of Mexico. Most are pretty host specific, but some, like the Meadow Spittlebug, can occur on a wide number of hosts. Those that are pests cause damage by keeping the tissues of their host plants constantly wet with the spittle masses. Their piercing, sucking mouth parts make slits into the tissues that can serve as easy entry points for various fungal and bacterial pathogens. The oviposition slits can also cause callus tissues to form and serve as another entrance place for diseases or borers. In this slide, the alder spittlebug is one of the truncated species that has a very narrow host range, but the diamondback spittlebug can be found attacking a wide range of perennial plants. Neither are considered to be significant pests in the urban landscape.